Good morning. Welcome to our session today. iiRDS latest development, as it already says, we are here today to give you an update. What's the iiRDS consortium been up to 2022? And of course, what we've got in the pipeline for next year. My name is Suzanne. I'm the project manager of the iiRDS consortium. Very welcome here today, the participants on site, and of course our online audience. For our online participants, I would just like to point out, please write your questions in the chat. We will get a chance to go through the questions at the end of the session. And without further ado, I would like to hand over to our first speaker. She is the steering committee chair with over 25 years of experience in technical communication, a training mentor, and I would like to welcome Ulrike Parson from Parson AG.
Good morning. Thank you for coming this early, so many of you. That's very nice. So I'm going to start with the political strategical overview of what we did last year, and I thought it would be useful to show you the mission statement that the steering committee worked out for iiRDS, so that you as tekom members who are a big part of this work and for whom we do this work know where we want to go to. And these are the 5 bullets that we agreed on in the steering committee. We want to make iiRDS the top choice for companies who are thinking about introducing content delivery, that they choose this model and this metadata model for content delivery. We want iiRDS to be the most widely used metadata model for technical communication. You know, there are other metadata models and ontologies out there, and it's fine if you combine that with iiRDS, but when it comes to technical communication, we want to be number one and the number one choice. iiRDS is set up as an international standard, and this holds also true for the iiRDS consortium. So we are trying to get people on board who represent international companies. And that was also the reason why we published everything, or why we still publish everything that we do in English. The specification, all the tools, they all have English UIs and English documentation. And the consortium wants to facilitate the use of iiRDS by providing free software applications, software solutions for you. And you will get to know one new software application today, which is presented by Jan Oevermann. So what we do is that we have this mission and we have the strategic goals, and then we derive working packages from that. And you don't have to read all that, just to show you how we work. We do have several working groups. For instance, tools and validation. These are the people that handle the open toolkit for iiRDS, for example. Then we have the working group development, which takes care of the further development of iiRDS. We have the working group standards, who handles all the international standardization. We want to make iiRDS an internationally recognized standard. And we started a new sub-working group or task force this year, because if you're familiar with the acronym, iiRDS means Intelligent Information Request and Delivery Standard, and the request part has not been worked out specifically and in detail during the last few years. So we decided to set up a working group for that, and this has been done this year. And the office, for which we now thankfully have Susan, we're very happy to have her. And the office is taking care of the online training, the marketing measures, and the pilot projects that we initiated this year. The pilot projects, just to present that, just let me show you the, oh, we don't have the status, sorry. The pilot projects, just to go into detail on that, is the consortium has decided to fund pilot projects with 5,000 euros. And we already got 4 pilot projects this year, and you will hear about them latest at the next conference, because with the €5,000, there goes the obligation that the people present their projects at this conference or another conference. And this is a measure that goes back to the strategic goal that we want to facilitate the use of iiRDS. So this is what we did this year. And you will see now the results of that in the presentations of my colleagues. Next year, similar structure, and we are going to continue to work on our mission, and we have several more work packages planned for next year. The working group validation and content will continue to work on the validation tool that you will see today. And we also want to support or strengthen the cooperation or the coordination of iiRDS and DIDA. So we are trying to get more closely to the DIDA standard. The working group development has a new release on the roadmap, and they are going to work on the extension of iiRDS with a maintenance domain, for example. Mark is going to tell you more about that, and we also want to work on an extension for smart standards. Standards like ISO, IEEE, they can be semantically enriched, and we would like to work on new iiRDS features which cover that. Also, we are going to work in development on a connection to upper level ontologies. The working group standards will finalize the publicly available specification, that is the acronym you see here in green, PASS, which will lead us to an international standard for iiRDS. And the request part is going to be worked out, and the office is going to work on all the marketing measures and the new pilot projects. And we want to strengthen the cooperation with universities. We think it's important that new students in technical communication get into contact with iiRDS already during their studies. And we would like to take some measures for that, for example, by cheaper memberships or free training for students. So this is what we have on the roadmap for next year. And now there's a working group. Are there any questions, or do we take that at the end? Susanne, do we take questions at the end, or?
Yes, the questions will be taken at the end.
Okay, then that was my contribution. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ulrike, for the update. And now we have a person you all know, Michael. He will give us an update. As the convener of the working group standards, he will give us an update of the further developments in the international standardization of iiRDS.
Yeah, Susanne, thank you very much for introducing me. When we talk about standardization, it's good to make a differentiation at the beginning between standardization and international standardization. Standardization generally are efforts of companies or consortia, like in our case, to create some useful documents and proposals for a certain field of technologies, which is the case with iiRDS. International standardization is based on international agreements, and there are 3 international standardization bodies: ISO, who everyone knows, IEC for the electrotechnical field, and the ITU. International standards are also prepared, and there are many initiatives from national levels. In Germany, it would be DIN, the German Institute for Standardization. It would be a DKE for the electrotechnical and telecommunications part. So why do people have interest in international standardization? For companies, it's of course very important to have stable situations when they work with the standard. They want to be sure that the standard is not changed every year, and therefore international standardization offers a lot of support in this case, as standards are guaranteed for a certain number of years, and they are changed in an public process where everyone can take part in. That's very important. So there were lots of requests that were addressed to our consortium from companies who asked, is this an international standard? Could you make it an international standard? So, and maybe you can see there is a certain balance that has to be found between a very dynamic, agile consortium that tries to develop a standard very quickly according to the needs of the industries. And on the other hand, we have this this slower international standardization processes. And that means also that some contents have to be published and to be fixed. So what we did last year, we tried to finish, and this year we tried to finish a so-called PAS, a publicly available specification, which is the first step into international standardization of iiRDS. But it does not mean that everything will be standardized in that sense of the word. It means that the PAS is a paper, a useful paper that describes the context in which intelligent information is being created, and that creates a link from this paper to the iiRDS consortium and to our website. To get the okay from the standardization side, they asked us, why don't you put some of your metadata into the standard? And that was a kind of a delicate question, because we didn't want to put everything in it. So we had the idea, we define some core metadata where it's very sure that they would never be changed, or where we don't see the necessity to change them in the future. So we had a small group, a task force that worked on the definition or finding out what the core metadata are, and we put these metadata as an example in the annex of our proposal, of the PAS proposal, which is not normative. That's very important. So it's not part of the standard in the sense that it's also owned by the IEC. It's just an example how you can achieve intelligent information. This PAS went through several loops. It's too complicated to mention everything. At the moment, we are having finished our work in the so-called Working Group 28 of IEC TC3. This working group had the task to work over the draft which we had submitted, and this work is finished. So next step will be we send this draft of the PAS to the secretary of the TC3 of IEC, and then there will be a public voting. A public means a voting amongst the voting members of the TC3. And hopefully it will be accepted, let's say at the beginning of next year. And then we have made this first step into international standardization. The next step would be to prepare a proposal, a so-called new work item proposal to IEC to make the PAS an international standard. And that will be taking another 3 years, I would say. That's the normal, or it could also take a little longer. But at the moment, we are quite optimistic that the PAS will be published and that we can go our next steps next year. In the context of standardization, the national level is also important. I already mentioned that. E-class is a consortium, and most of you know that publishes requirements regarding to products. We were in contact with e-class and we agreed on kind of a paper, and that will be an extension to the new release of iiRDS, so that everything that's done in iiRDS can also have a link to e-class, and we can include, for instance, iiRDS from e-class into the whole context of iiRDS. Another very important initiative, especially on national level in Germany, is Industry 4.0. We want to be part of Industry 4.0. That's very logical. The next step is to work on this. And what we want to achieve is we want to be part of the administration shell, so-called administration shell of Industry 4.0. And there are two ongoing projects. The so-called Interopera project that we have made some proposals to the Industry 4.0 platform, and it was accepted. We are now waiting for a working group that will be convened hopefully soon. And we will be working, we start to work on proposals on how to integrate iiRDS in the administration shell. The other project is the iiRDS project. This is carried out by DKE, which is the German national standardization body for electrotechnical things. And this is important because, and very interesting, because DKE and the iiRDS project, they want to use iiRDS as the metadata language for the integration of information about standards contents into, let's say, the digital twin. And we hope to create, they will be becoming members in our consortium, and we hope that we can integrate that, and we will be creating in the future a new domain within iiRDS for the delivery of contents of standards. And that will be a very important step, because that will make iiRDS really more well-known, even also in the national level then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, for the update on standards. We have now the next speaker, which is Mark Schubert. He's the convener of the Working Group Development and also a consultant at Parson AG. Yeah. So the floor is yours, Mark.
Thanks for the introduction. Can you hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm going to tell you a bit about the activities of the Working Group Development, what we've been up to during the last year. The Working Group Development maintains the specification document and also the RDF file, so the metadata vocabulary. No, that was the wrong one. Okay. And I'm going to tell you a bit about the ongoing work, about the terms and definitions overhaul or rework, which has been quite a massive work package for us. And I'd like to tell you a bit about the further developments, things that we are planning to do next year. On the right-hand side, you can see a screenshot from our bug tracker system, Jira. And these are all the issues that we picked for the next release. When you look at that, probably looks like the release is still a kind of like a long way to go. But actually, we are hoping to release a new version this year. And the focus for that release is mainly hardening of the standard. Michael said that standard needs a certain amount of stability, but also has to anticipate new use cases. So we're trying to balance these two aspects. And for this release, it's going to be mainly specification improvements, bug fixes, then the terms and definitions overhaul, and one new feature that I'm going to present. Here's just a random example that I picked so that you get an idea of what the changes to the specification look like. One is an example that we added about disambiguating product properties and product functions. People seem to have problems with that, so we filed a bug and added an example for that. That's the lower green one. I think I can. Oh no, that's not. I cannot. Don't have a laser pointer here. And the other one on the upper right-hand side, that's a definition that we added to the glossary about docking points, because people were having problems understanding how to extend the standard, and there were misconceptions, and so we thought, okay, that's definitely worth a change to the specification. But as you can see, it's rather clarifications. It's not substantial changes to the specification. So if you already know what iiRDS is about, It might help you answer very specific questions, but it's not reinventing the wheel. It's not completely new. Just also some bug fixes I'd like to mention. So bug fixes, well, there's nothing major that was broken that we fixed, but there was still some cardinality issues, and Jan is going to mention something later on that's also a bug that we need to fix for the next release related to the cardinalities. Yeah, some typos were fixed, stuff like that. Okay, the new feature that was also mentioned earlier, that's the related to the E-class classification. And we were asked, how do you combine iiRDS? How do you use E-class in combination with iiRDS? And there was a task force that looked into that issue, and they developed a classification connector, which is not only for E-class, but it's pretty generic. So you could also use that for other classification systems. And this connector is going to make iiRDS a multi-classification capable standard. That one will be part of the next release. If you're familiar with the rather, well, not so straightforward complex identities that iiRDS is using to represent resources that are also have identities or identifiers in other systems, if you're familiar with that, then also the external classification will look familiar to you, because it's kind of based on that. So the external classification is going to be used, for example, with product features, components, and probably also document types. We have to discuss that. And it will allow you to point to another classification. It's not meant to be used with other classification systems that are already available as RDFS or OWL, because then you could just use their identifiers directly. There wouldn't be a need for that. But we think it's going to be an improvement. Yeah, just another code snippet. If you're interested in details, you can ask me later. We also started working on some things, but where we thought it's worthwhile to work on, but then it turned out that the effort was too high to include them in the next release. So that's been postponed. One is the maintenance domain. And while we were working on it, we realized that there's other ontologies out there that model maintenance processes. And we wanted to evaluate them first, so we said, okay, that requires more time. Let's focus on the other issues first. So that's been put on hold. And another aspect is also the taxonomy and the scores integration. That's also something where we started working on, but then it turned out to be of lower priority than the other issues. So, okay, let me tell you a bit about the terms and definitions, about the overhaul here. If you looked into iiRDS and some of the concepts and read some of the definitions, then you've probably noticed that they are sometimes of different quality. Some are, well, on point. Some are maybe a bit redundant or maybe even circular. So we decided that we want to harmonize that and improve that. Because in the end, it also means hardening the standard, because the standard, the concepts and the definitions of the concepts are, of course, one of the most important parts of exchanging metadata. So we started working on that, and we are on a good way, but it is also, I mean, if you're familiar with terminology work, it is a lot of work. The effort is quite high. But that is definitely going to be in the next release, and this is also the one aspect which is determining the time that we release it. Yeah, because that's going to be the central aspect of the release. One interesting thing about the terms and definitions overhaul is that it's not only the terms and definitions, but it's also going to add a bit more more information that's relevant from a terminological point of view. We're going to add the scores preferred label. We're going to add scores example and things like that. So it'll be all in all a richer model with richer definitions and hopefully also helpful more helpful when using it. We will also include pointers to other definitions and other standards, so that might also be helpful understanding the concepts. Yeah, what are we going to do after that release? We're going to continue with the topics that we put on hold, of course. So there's the maintenance domain that was mentioned, the taxonomy integration, the standard domain, which was mentioned earlier. We also have a draft version of that already, so quite optimistic that we'll see that in the not too far future. And we're also going to open up, or planning to open up iiRDS for OWL a bit, which will allow to implement a bit more sophisticated use cases with other ontologies maybe. So we looked into other ontologies, what's out there on European level in particular. There's a project, OntoCommons project, which is trying to align European ontologies. So we looked into that, and there's going to be an OWL wrapper file that you can use. I know that some projects already use OWL, and it's going to be helpful for them. But usage will be optional, so you don't have to worry. It's not going to break anything that you've already implemented. Yeah, this is just a bit of an example of what one of the advantages of that OWL wrapper file is. You can pick what you want. You can import everything, import other ontologies, integrate them more easily. It's just a start for you. It might help you implementing these more sophisticated use cases. Also, hopefully the tool support will improve slightly, because there's more OWL tools out there than strictly RDF tools. So yeah, that might be one additional benefit. This one's here, a slide of the top level ontology alignment. I'm not sure if we do have time for that though. I don't want to, no, I'm going to skip that. If you're interested in that, get in touch, please. Standards domain, also here, a short excerpt. That will allow you to add standards to an iiRDS package. So if you've got documentation for a specific product, and the product maybe is also standard compliant, that you want to add the document, want to deliver parts of the standard information, then you will be able to do that, because we're going to add that vocabulary. Okay, that was it from the working group development. I'd also like to tell you a bit about the request part. It's, there was a dedicated sub-working group task force that worked on that. And yeah, it's quite funny that one of the letters in the acronym wasn't really part of the specification of the standard for the last couple of years. So the working group looked at different use cases and thought, okay, what should the request part look like? So they were defining a scope, define what's out of scope, define user stories and stuff like that. And that's the starting point for next year for the request part then. Yeah, use cases like that. If you see that slide, it's probably quite obvious. You want to have a standardized interface to request certain resources, and use cases is of course conventional, conventional content delivery. It's probably not that conventional, but you know what I mean. Context-sensitive help, chatbot support, things like that. So the first phase will be relatively, will be a starting point, of course. So it's only going to allow you to query resources, iiRDS resources, in particular the one that are listed here, editions, information units, and so on. It will not, and that's out of scope, it will not allow you to edit the data pool, which is behind that REST API. That is out of scope. Yeah, that is on that slide here. So there's going to probably be then a further flashed out version after that first one later on. Yeah, and that was it from me, from the working group development and request task force. So let me hand this one over to you.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Next we have Achim Steinacker and Jan Oevermann. Achim Steinacker is the convener of the next working group, and also division manager at Empolis Information Management, and Jan Oevermann, who developed the validation tool together with the working group. They will give you both an insight, and also Jan is part of the iiRDS consortium as well. In the steering committee, do you need the remote?
No, I'm fine.
You're all fine. Cheers.
So good morning from my side. My role this morning is quite short. It's more or less just introducing Jan. As the convener of the working group, the main focus this year was the implementation of a validation tool. I mean, the motivation is quite clear. iiRDS is alive, and vendors of authoring systems, they are producing iiRDS content, and vendors of delivery systems, they are using it. But there's quite a lot of iiRDS content outside which is just not valid. And it takes a lot of time to have a close look on each package, why it's not valid, and we are playing some finger pointing between the different vendors, because both say, I'm fine, I'm able to read iiRDS, and the other one says, I'm fine, I'm able to export iiRDS. So what we need is a validation of packages, especially because many packages at the moment are also created manually, and with copy and paste, there are just some quite obvious mistakes in the packages. So we decided to publish a tender for a validation tool, and plusmeta or Jan, they were selected for the implementation, and it took about 3 months, the implementation phase with all the sprint reviews, and finally we have a validation tool right for the beginning of the tekom available, which is publicly available, and which can easily be used to validate iiRDS packages. And as Jan is also hanging around here, we took the chance to let him present the tool.
Okay, hello everybody from my side. I just have to connect my computer. Just a moment. Okay. So give me a second. Should work just fine. Do we have a picture? Okay, perfect. So yeah, today we are introducing the iiRDS validation tool. The ones of you who are familiar with the iiRDS Open Toolkit will recognize some similarities. So we took the idea of the Open Toolkit and the basis of the software and implemented the validation tool on top of it to be as efficient as possible. And it's now publicly available. You can either just go on the iirds.org website, and from there is, I think, a link on the starting page where you can just click on it, or the other URL you can use is iirds-validation.plusmeta.de. So what you're seeing here is the homepage of the validation tool. It is a tool which is available in 2 languages. You can switch the language anytime between German and English. And you can also have some settings which you can use. You can switch to dark mode for the ones who are night owls of you. You can show shortcuts and so on. And the tool will remember some settings which you are adjusting during the use. And you can also reset them. There's possibility to give feedback, to go to the source code, which is hosted on GitHub. So anyone who wants to participate in the further development of the iiRDS validation tool can do so. All the code is publicly available and can be seen by anyone, which is important because the other important point is right on top here. It's the usage information and the privacy statement. And this was one important point during the conception and the development phase, that we want to make a tool which has no privacy problems, so anybody can use it, even with company data, even with sensitive data. So the complete validation process is done in the browser, client side, and there is no data exchange with the server or something. So everything you put into the validation tool stays on your computer, and everything, even the computing, is done in your browser client side. So you can use it without any trouble with data protection or IT security restrictions. I will now show some quick demos how the tool works. We start with some packages which are valid, so this is obviously the best case. For example, when you are producing iiRDS packages with the iiRDS Open Toolkit. And I have some example here. You can just drag and drop one of the iiRDS packages onto the home page. Then a quick validation is done, and now you see it's a valid iiRDS 1.1, no violations, and there are some total number of rules which are checked during the validation. You can start a new validation with some older package which we produced with our tool. And as you can see here now, it's also valid iiRDS, but it's an older version, so this one is iiRDS 1.0. So everything's green. This is the perfect case, but also this is the most boring case because you can't see much. Now we want to see some juicy errors. And what we did was during development, we took a lot of time to go through the whole specification and extract all the rules which we could find in the specification and put them aside and try to define them as computer functions. And computer functions are, in comparison to text, more exact. So you have to define a very specific function, and there's just a yes or no. And text can be ambiguous. Also, our specification is quite long. I think if you print it out, it might be 100 pages or so. So it could be that you make a statement at the beginning of the specification and you contradict yourself at the end of the specification. And this is actually what we found. And we tried to test it on ourselves, so to say, and put the iiRDS sample content, which should be like the reference iiRDS package, into the tool. And what we found was a bit surprising, because like the sample content is not valid iiRDS. And we found some violations there, and these are not so obvious, so no blaming here, but actually it's more that the specification was ambiguous, and this was what Mark already mentioned. If we look here, just for a bit of explaining, there are 2 violations detected. This means that 2 rules were broken during the analysis. There is a total of 12 occurrences in total, so we have like 2 different errors, but they have occurrences all over the place, and you can also filter by them. So you see we have some IDs for the rules. M18 is like 11 occurrences, and M22.1 is 1 occurrence. And if we now look at the error report, we can see that we have like a preview for every violation, and there is the rule from the specification which says an iiRDS party must have a related iiRDS party role, which is that is assigned by the property has party role such as author, supplier, or manufacturer, which is a must rule and is in the context of the schema. And as you see here in the preview in line 539, in the metadata file, there is a party defined, but we don't have a party role assigned, so this is a violation of the specification. When you want to dive deeper, there is a big blue button here which says go to specification, and you can just click on it, and then it will jump right into the paragraph which is mentioned and which was violated and is also highlighted here in purple. So this is the same sentence, and we just took like the sentences out of the specification and put a deep link on it. Why is this ambiguous? Because we have also a big table of cardinalities later on in the specification, somewhere around, I think here, properties and relations, and there it says that the party role is optional. So you can now argue if the iiRDS sample content is valid or not. To look at the other rules, there's another violation here which was detected, which says that if you want to extend the iiRDS vocabulary with the product variants, you need a definition there, and here is a reference to an iiRDS product variant which is not itself defined in the package. So this is a violation which was found a total of 11 times. You now can go through all these errors if you like. They are listed here, but you can also start a new validation. Let's look at another example. This one is another nice error, and what you see here is that we have a bit of a complicated process to model directories, and in this process you have to, like, your last node in the directory has to be of the kind of nil directory node, and this was not done here in this example. So it says to model closed list, the last node in a list must have the property as next sibling to an instance of the class iiRDS nil, which was not done here, and which is why the package here is not valid. Just for the functionality of the tool, you have also the possibility to hide the preview if you'd like to. You have also the possibility to, we have now here a line-based, so this is kind of like the actual file which was previewed here, and we just put some highlights on it. You can also have a more like XML view of the element itself in a more formatted way, and this is why the button format is here, which you can click on, and then it will just do a quick formatting of the element which caused the violation, actually. Yeah, this is how the validation tool works. We are happy to introduce it now to the public to make it easier for you to put it in your mobile phone. There's a QR code which is just pointing to the validation tool for some of you who want to try it out, but obviously you need some kind of iiRDS package to try it out. Don't throw some PDFs in it. It will not work. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jan. And I mean, by now, I only have feedback from my own company because it wasn't public available. And the feedback from our customer success managers is enthusiastic because, and I'm also very happy about it because all those wrong and iiRDS packages containing errors circling around in our company, at the end, they were put on my desk and say, Achim, you should have a look at it and tell us why it's not working. And now it's really perfect because we can offer it to our customers. We can tell them, go there, just validate your iiRDS package, and if you can see everything is fine, then we can guarantee that we are able to import it. So, and it will make life for our delivery systems much, much easier. And for everyone dealing and playing around with the iiRDS, I'm sure it will be a very helpful tool. And now Susanne with some closing remarks and time for questions, right?
Well, yes. Basically, I just would like to open the floor for questions now. We have got a couple of minutes left. If you have any questions here in the audience, I will in the meantime, maybe we can connect the presentation again, because we have also the QR code that we would like you to scan and just rate the session today, exactly to get some feedback on your impressions of this session. So do you have any questions here in the audience? If not, I got some questions from our participants online. Just let me check that. They're mainly directed, of course, at Jan maybe and Achim. Will you supply the list of the 65 rules which are tested in the tool?
Yeah, as I already mentioned, the tool is open source. The link to the open source repository is included in the tool. And there you can find the rules. We also included a README file. And in the README file, there is a direct pointer to the list of rules, which you can then look through yourself.
Okay, thanks. We also got a question about the standard domain. Maybe that's something for Mark. Will the standard domain get more metadata? For example, more information subjects? Yes? Mhm. I think, yeah, I think you're unmuted, right?
Yeah, there's going to be, of course, slightly more metadata, but it's going to be in a specific, for that specific domain in a file that you don't have to use. Just like with the other domains, you only use what you really need. You pick the core vocabulary, and then you decide whether you want to use the software domain, the machinery domain, the standards domain, and then you can just use these. But yeah, it's going to be more metadata.
All right. Thank you very much. In the meantime, is there some questions from the audience here? If not, we're finishing more or less on time anyway. So let me just pull up the QR code, which, oh, no. Is the connection there to that presentation, maybe? If we can put one up. Yes, now. Now we got the QR code. So if you want to give us your feedback on today's session, and also stay tuned. We've got 2 more sessions on iiRDS. This is an iiRDS morning for everyone interested in iiRDS, especially the 2 next sessions. They will give you lots of insights on use cases, implementations by members of the iiRDS consortium. So the next session is in German. Stay tuned for our online participants, or just remain here. And then we have got a session at 11:20 with more use cases as well in English again. Thank you very much.